Good evening. Welcome to World Today, your daily window to the world. On the show today, the latest on the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Moscow accuses the United States of preparing a toxic chemicals provocation in Ukraine, just as Russians tighten their noose on Ukraine's Bakhmut. Situation remains extremely tense there. Also on the show, we talk about the Northern Ireland Protocol being replaced by the historic Windsor Agreement. UK Prime Minister said that the deal would ease trade between Britain and Northern Ireland. US Republican Party presidential candidate Nikki Haley has said that COVID likely came from a Chinese lab, and she asked to cut US aid to China. And back home, the crucial G20 foreign ministers meet begins in New Delhi on Thursday. We will tell you all about it, this and much more over the next 1 hour. I'm Tanvi Taneja. Let's get started with the headlines. UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak strikes a new deal with the EU on post-Brexit trade rules for Northern Ireland, says two sides agree to remove any sense of a border between Britain and its province, and it would pave the way for a new chapter in London's relationship with the bloc. Leaders of the United States and France welcome post-Brexit Northern Ireland deal between Britain and the EU. Northern Ireland's Democratic Unionist Party raises key questions on the application of European Union law, while Sinn Féin hopes that the deal leads to restoration of power sharing. Opposition Labour Party too signals its support to the deal. US calls India its global strategic partner, cites Prime Minister Modi's "not an era of war" remarks. US State Department spokesperson Ned Price says, ahead of Secretary of State Antony Blinken's visit to India, Blinken to attend G20 foreign ministers meeting, Quad ministerial meeting, and to also hold talks with the External Affairs Minister. Russia accuses the United States of planning a provocation in Ukraine using toxic chemicals. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken visits Kazakhstan for a series of meetings with top diplomats of Central Asian nations as tensions soar over Russia's war in Ukraine. Foreign ministers of the G20 countries converge in New Delhi for the first G20 India foreign ministers meeting to be held on Thursday. India's perspective on the emerging challenges and international matters to be shared in the meet. Hong Kong to scrap COVID mask mandate from March the 1st. Drawing to a close the prolonged COVID era that damaged its economy and its standing in the world, the move comes as Hong Kong seeks to attract tourists and overseas workers to revitalize the finance hub. Israeli-American shot by suspected Palestinian gunmen in the occupied West Bank. Shooting happened after Israeli settlers attacked Palestinian villages in the West Bank earlier. US ambassador confirms the death of US citizen. And in sports, India all set to face Australia in the third test at Indore's Holkar Stadium. India currently leading the series by 2-0. However, Australia, who remains at top of the WTC table, will look forward to change the game at the Holkar pitch. And in football, Lionel Messi wins FIFA Player of the Year Award 2022. Messi amassed a staggering 7 goals and 3 assists in Argentina's title-winning run at the FIFA World Cup 2022. Alexia Putellas claims the Women's Award. So those were the headlines we were tracking in World Today. Let's begin the bulletin with the big news. So Britain and the European Union have reached an agreement on new trade rules in Northern Ireland. The deal could potentially resolve the issue of imports and border checks in Northern Ireland that has so far been one of the most challenging aspects of the United Kingdom's split from the EU, because Northern Ireland is part of the UK but shares a land border with the Republic of Ireland. However, with the new deal called the Windsor Framework, both the leaders, UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak and EU Chief Ursula von der Leyen, believe that this will be the beginning of a new chapter for both of them and will ensure smooth trade. Here's more.
British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak struck a new deal with European Union on post-Brexit trade rules for Northern Ireland on Monday and said it would pave the way for a new chapter in London's relationship with the bloc. Standing alongside European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen at a news conference in Windsor, Sunak said the two sides had agreed to remove any sense of border between Britain and its province, a situation that had angered politicians on both sides. The agreement marks a high-risk strategy for Sunak just 4 months after he took office. He's looking to secure improved relations with Brussels and the United States without angering the wing of his party most wedded to Brexit. He immediately won applause from business groups who welcomed the easing of trade rules and a promise from von der Leyen that she would be willing to allow British scientists to join a vast EU research program if Sunak can get the deal passed. His party.
I welcomed President von der Leyen to Windsor to continue our discussions about the Northern Ireland Protocol. I'm pleased to report that we have now made a decisive breakthrough. Together, we have changed the original protocol and are today announcing the new Windsor Framework. Today's agreement delivers smooth-flowing trade within the whole United Kingdom, protects Northern Ireland's place in our union, and safeguards sovereignty for the people of Northern Ireland.
Sunak is likely to talk up the fact that he has secured a so-called Stormont break, which he said would allow Stormont, the regional assembly, to stop any changes to EU goods rules that would have significant and lasting effects on everyday lives. If the break is pulled, the UK government will have a veto. Von der Leyen said she hoped the break could be avoided if the two sides consulted each other extensively when introducing new laws and regulatory changes.
We can take pride in the fact that we have delivered on that commitment. Because today we have reached an agreement in principle on the Windsor Framework. The Windsor Framework lays down new arrangements on Ireland, Northern Ireland. This new framework will allow us to begin a new chapter. It provides for long-lasting solutions that both of us are confident will work for all people and businesses in Northern Ireland.
The issue has been one of the most contentious regarding Britain's departure from the European Union in 2020. A return to a hard border between the province and Ireland, an EU member, could have jeopardized the peace deal known as the Good Friday Agreement.
This is the beginning of a new chapter in our relationship. For a quarter of a century, the Belfast Good Friday Agreement has endured because, at its heart, is respect for the aspirations and identity of all communities. Today's agreement is about preserving that delicate balance and charting a new way forward for the people of Northern Ireland.
Britain's opposition Labour Party will vote in favour of the new post-Brexit trade deal agreed earlier. On Monday, party leader Keir Starmer said in Parliament.
But, Mr Speaker, DCI Caldwell shooting is a reminder that we must continue to strive for peace, that we in the House must take our obligations under the Good Friday Agreement and to the people of Northern Ireland as seriously as they do. It is in that spirit that I have been clear for some time that if the Prime Minister were to get an agreement with the EU, and if their agreement is in the interests of this country and Northern Ireland, then Labour would support it. Yeah. And we will stick to our word. Yeah. We will not snipe, we will not seek to play political games. And when the Prime Minister puts this deal forward for a vote, Labour will support it and vote for it.
However, Democratic Unionist Party lawmaker Sammy Wilson said he still feared that Northern Ireland's position within the United Kingdom was not going to be restored by the new deal on post-Brexit trade rules.
Could I remind the Prime Minister that although he talks about 1,700 pages of EU law being removed from Northern Ireland, hundreds of thousands of pages will still remain. Border posts are still being planned to be built, and the Prime Minister has admitted that future EU laws will apply to Northern Ireland unless, under paragraph 52, his government decides not to proceed with law changes for the United Kingdom as a whole, or he vetoes EU proposals in the Joint Committee. Can he understand why we don't have confidence in that, and why we still fear that our position within the United Kingdom is not going to be restored by this agreement?
Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has said Parliament will get to vote on the deal, but no date for that has been set. The success of the deal is likely to hinge on whether it convinces the Democratic Unionist Party to end its boycott of Northern Ireland's power-sharing arrangements. These were central to the 1998 peace agreement, which mostly ended 3 decades of sectarian and political violence in Northern Ireland. Bureau Report, DD India.
Britain's King Charles III met European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen on Monday after the EU and the United Kingdom struck a new deal on post-Brexit trade rules for Northern Ireland. The meeting took place at Windsor Castle. During a news conference on Monday afternoon, British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak said that the two sides had agreed to remove any sense of a border between Britain and its province. Now, US and French presidents Joe Biden and Emmanuel Macron said that they welcome the new deal between British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak and the European Union on post-Brexit trade rules for Northern Ireland. The deal seeks to resolve the tensions caused by the Northern Ireland Protocol, a complex agreement which set the trading rules for the British-ruled region that London agreed before it left the EU, but now says are unworkable. Biden, who often speaks with pride of his Irish roots, described the deal as an essential step to ensuring that the peace from the Good Friday Agreement was preserved. US officials had previously warned that any action which endangered the peace agreement could harm the prospects of a US-UK trade deal. France's Macron echoed his sentiment, welcoming the agreement and saying that the deal would protect the European internal market. Sunak is hoping that a successful outcome will improve cooperation with the EU in areas beyond Northern Ireland, including the regulation of financial services and in helping to stem an influx of migrants in small boats across the Channel. White House National Security spokesman John Kirby has said that the Biden administration is grateful that the British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak struck a new deal with the European Union on post-Brexit trade rules for Northern Ireland.
Grateful that the two sides were able to come up with this Windsor framework, as they call it, this agreement in keeping with the Northern Ireland protocols. We believe that this will help improve the prosperity of both the EU and the UK, and will open up all kinds of now avenues for trade that were somewhat at risk. So we'll leave things where they are right now.
The Russian Defense Ministry accused the United States of planning a provocation in Ukraine using toxic chemicals and blaming the Russian forces for it. Russian forces, meanwhile, have been pressing their offensive around Bakhmut, trying to encircle the small mining city. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken has visited Kazakhstan for a series of meetings with top diplomats of the Central Asian nations as tensions soar over Russia's war in Ukraine. We have a report.
Russia accused the United States of planning a provocation in Ukraine using toxic chemicals. Russian Defense Ministry cited former US Ambassador to Russia, John Sullivan, as saying that Russian troops plan to use chemical weapons in the area of the special military operation.
On February 22nd, an influential American NGO held a conference on events in Ukraine. Speaking at the event, a former US ambassador to Russia, John Sullivan, said, and I quote, "Russian troops plan to deploy chemical weapons in the area of the special military operation. We regard this information as an intention of the United States themselves and their accomplices to carry out a provocation in Ukraine using toxic chemicals."
Meanwhile, US Secretary of State Antony Blinken met with the President and Foreign Minister of Kazakhstan following the first anniversary of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Blinken's visit to the capitals of Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan is his first to the region as the Biden administration's top diplomat. The trip is the most senior to Central Asia by an official in US President Joe Biden's administration and comes days after the anniversary of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, which has received billions of dollars in Western support. Central Asian nations have long-standing security and economic relationships with Russia, but unlike fellow former Soviet Republic Belarus, they have not rallied behind Moscow over the war. All 5 Central Asian nations abstained or did not vote last week on a UN General Assembly resolution that demanded that Moscow pull out of Ukraine. World Today Desk, DD India.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky seems to have been inadequately helped by its Western allies. In his latest nightly speech on Monday, Zelensky reiterated that in order to ensure full protection of the sky, his country needed modern warplanes to be provided by partners. Furthermore, he also stressed that the situation around the frontline hotspot of Bakhmut was getting increasingly difficult. The Western allies have been lately indecisive of the supply of modern jets to Ukraine, saying that they were not enough trained to use them, which Zelensky terms as aviation taboo.
We need the aviation component of the air defense, the modern warplanes to protect the entire territory of our state from Russian terror. Air defense is complete when it has aircraft, modern aircraft. Our pilots and anti-aircraft units and other experts of our Air Force are doing a great job, but we will be able to completely protect our skies when the aviation taboo is fully lifted in relations with our partners. In the Bakhmut sector, the situation is constantly becoming more difficult. The enemy is constantly destroying everything that can be used to protect our positions for fortification and defense.
While the Ukrainian resistance continues in the bloody war of Bakhmut, the front line near Russian-controlled Donetsk city in East Ukraine, a Ukrainian artillery brigade fired Grad rockets on Monday. One of the army officials said that his unit was launching rockets 15 kilometers from the city, observing no advances on either side due to mud. So in this ongoing war, which is now going on for the last year, the toxic chemicals provocation has been used more than once. Let's try and see how often this chemical weapons provocation has been used by both sides. There are claims and counterclaims. So on 7th of February 2023, Russia claimed the alleged use of chemical weapons by Ukrainian forces near the eastern Ukrainian towns of Soledar and Bakhmut. Next, in December 2022, the Ukrainian army, the Ukrainian Navy accused Russia of using a banned chemical weapon against Ukrainian troops in eastern Ukraine. Then, of course, this false flag operation where one side of a conflict, commits an act and tries to make it appear that the other side committed it so as to justify it. So in March 2022, Russia accused Ukraine of possibly planning a false flag chemical attack. Next slide, please. Now, let's just understand how often in the past these chemical weapons have been used in the war. Well, during the First World War, Germany, France, next slide, please. Germany, France, United Kingdom, Russia developed a wide array of chemical arms, including choking, blister, and irritant agents. And during the First World War, German army initiated modern chemical warfare by launching a chlorine attack at Ypres, Belgium in 1915. Now, during the Second World War, Germany developed nerve agents such as Toman, Soman and Sarin. Then Egyptian military forces participating in Yemen's civil war used chemical weapons in 1963, 1965, 1967. And during the Soviet intervention into the Afghan war, that was between 1978 to 1992, chemical arms were used against the Mujahideen rebels. In 1987, Libya used mustard munitions against rebels in Chad. and the most extensive Second World War use of chemical weapons occurred during the Iran-Iraq War, that's 1980 to 1988. In the 21st century, the Syrian civil war, where Syrian troops were reported to have used chemical weapons in early 2013. Now, Russia says it has destroyed the last of its chemical weapon stocks in 2017. But since then, there have been at least 2 chemical attacks blamed on Moscow. There is evidence that Russia inherited these non-traditional agents, NTAs, which are often called Novichoks. These are binary nerve agents from its former Soviet arsenals. So what are these 2 examples? In March 2018, Sergei Skripal, a former Russian intelligence officer, and his daughter were found unconscious in Salisbury, England. In August 2020, the prominent Russian opposition activist Alexei Navalny was also poisoned with these Novichoks. So this is what is the history of chemicals weapons used in the past, and of course the blames and counter blames between both sides about this false flag attack. Now, to understand this chemical attack, weapons, provocation, and where Russia-Ukraine conflict stands as of now, we are joined by Lieutenant General Rakesh Sharma on the show. He's Distinguished Fellow VIF and Center for Land Warfare Studies. A very good evening to you, sir. Russia has accused the United States of planning a provocation in Ukraine using toxic chemicals. Can this accusation be taken seriously at all, or is it just a part of a battle of perception being waged over the conflict in Ukraine?
Thank you for inviting me. This issue has been going on for last 1 year, and as you rightly pointed out, number of times it came up in a very strong manner. Mariupol was one issue. When Mariupol attack came up, this came up in a big manner. In May last year also. So, fact of the matter is that it hasn't been proven till date. Every time you say that there is chemical weapons being used, investigation do take place, and investigation doesn't prove anything. So, what has been raised in the course of last few days, about 2-3 weeks, that the Americans may sponsor a chemical weapon attack or things like that, is I think also one in the chain of things happening here. Till the time it is proven, it is false flag, or it is information warfare, or it's bringing pressure across to the adversary that there is chemical weapons being used, or making a base for creating more tensions across there. So I would not reckon that we should talk chemical weapons as having been used or likely to be used till the time we have a firm information that they have been employed.
Now, unlike the former Soviet Republic, Belarus, other Central Asian nations like Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan have not rallied behind Moscow in the conflict. Can you shed some light on this difference in the stand of these Central Asian countries?
So, Central Asian countries for a very long period of time have been creating a balance between Russian Federation and the West. And there is logic to it. See, there are a large amount of diaspora of the Central Asian republics which works inside Russia, and they send remittances across to their country. So historically, there are many Kazakhs who are working in Russia. There are many Turkmens and many Uzbeks who are working across there, and then the remittances keep coming in. So now to totally delink the Russian Federation is not right. And then, of course, the language being spoken in many of these countries is Russian by nature. So they cannot get out of the coattails of Russia, and they probably don't wish to do so to get themselves outside. They are also retaining a balance. Now, as you hear, Secretary Blinken is now today in Kazakhstan and 5+1 talks. Now, these 5+1 talks are many countries are doing. India is also doing talks with India and Central Asia. Japan is doing Japan and Central Asia. So these 1+1 talks are being done by a large number of nations, and United States also started doing this 5+1 talks from 2015 onwards. So I personally feel that though there is no, it hasn't been the kind of support that Belarus has given to Russians. But the Central Asian Republic has also maintained a very good balance, a kind of neutrality in the whole issue by supporting the Russian in this last vote which took place in United Nations General Assembly. They all did not vote for against Russia. So the fact of the matter is that when nations get caught between two great powers, it is the balance they wish to maintain is what is more important.
Now, US Secretary of State Antony Blinken has just visited the capitals of Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan in his first visit to the region. He's also meeting officials from all 5 former Soviet republics. How significant is Blinken's visit and what is its purpose?
So all the 3 countries that Secretary Blinken is visiting now have not voted with the West. So Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan and India. India also did not vote. So this visit is significant in the manner that Secretary Blinken is trying to create a atmosphere, a kind of a feel in many of these countries, and that they should support the West. But having said that, each nation works on its own national interests, which is the basis of all foreign policy. And these national interests may demand that they maintain neutrality or try and bring about peace in their own manner. That may not be the way the West wants it to be done, but it is a manner that the country decides it to be pursued. So while Secretary Blinken's visit and meeting all the 5 foreign ministers is significant, but I don't think it will make an earth-shaking change in the attitude and the philosophy and the policies of these nations. And having said that, I must add on a line. I think the time is now for a great push to diplomacy which is happening. Now, President Zelensky says he wants to meet President Xi Jinping. The Saudi foreign minister visited Kyiv yesterday or day before yesterday. President Biden went to Kyiv across there. There is a whole lot of movement across there, which gives a feel. And of course, the Chinese have come up with a 12-point program of bringing peace across there. Whether you like it or don't like it, but there has been effort on the part of the Chinese. So there is intense movement which is evident on the diplomatic front across on all sides of the divide. And I think maybe there is something positive going to come out of this.
Okay, we hope so. What kind of move or concessions will Ukraine and Russia now have to make for a possible end to the conflict? Would Moscow be willing to renounce its claims to 4 Ukrainian regions where referendums were held? And what concessions would Ukraine need to make? Indeed, do you even see the possibility of an early resumption of peace talks?
I would say that, look, has a fatigue set in? You know, you see the number of casualties that both countries have had in men and material. These are very significant numbers. Now, there is nationalism in Ukraine, but there is a finite number of manpower or troops that they can be created from within Ukraine to keep fighting a prolonged war. And I think similarly, Russians can't keep producing manpower. There is a finite number of people. Many of these Central Asian Republic young people who are working in Russia have come back to Central Asian republics back because they didn't want to be, forced to join or conscripted across in Russia. So there is manpower. Second is that the West has supplied a whole lot of equipment or ammunition across there and intelligence and other support across to Ukraine. But this all was coming out of reserves, which was actually being held in these countries. Now this is all finishing. So next lot of whatever stuff that the West has to provide has to be manufactured in the factories, recreated and then sent across to Ukraine. This will cause an increasing amount of strain in the West. While you can say that the United States can print more and more dollars and then give it to these factories to produce it. But there is a limit into what the factories and what speed that they can produce. After so much of effort, the first lot of Polish tanks have just landed up 2 days ago. And they say at the best amount that they can get is about 200 tanks. So now the fact is that there is a kind of saturation to what is being done. And third point, if you follow what's happened in the war in the course of last, 2 weeks or so, 2 months or so, there is after November a kind of stalemate. They've been fighting in Solidar. Okay, Solidar is gone. Then they've been fighting in Bakhmut, and there are missiles being fired and all that. But on the ground, the movement of forces is as if it is nothing much to talk about. So there is a fixation that has come onto the borderlines. So there, I think that there is a stalemate, and to break the stalemate, to say a spring offensive will come. Now, the the lines of defenses have been very strongly held. So to say that they will be able to pierce through and go ahead, I think there is a stalemate across here.
So
Last
the next
point, I wish
stage,
to, last point,
yeah,
let me allow me.
please go on, sir.
The point is the question that you asked. Will Russians vacate the 4 regions that they have occupied?
Yes.
Now, I put my head into the noose and tell you that I don't think the Russians are going to vacate Donbass, and Crimea is out of question. Because Crimea, they say 1954, Khrushchev have given it to Ukraine. Now that Ukraine is not part of it, so intent on joining the West, Crimea. So neither Crimea, Crimea is a warm water port for them, and nor Donbass. I think both the regions the Russians are not going to vacate. Now that's an issue not acceptable to Ukraine. So if it's not acceptable to Ukraine, then there is no matching ground. So I think we are stuck into a game where into an impasse that there is no forward movement here. The Russians not withdrawing it, and the Ukrainians not wanting to settle it till the time the Russians withdraw. So there is a problem here.
So this stalemate, as you see, do you when in a warlike situation as this, such huge, where reconstruction costs are huge, the reserves are shortening by the day. So after the stalemate, do you see a likely end to the war? Like not soon enough?
So it's God Almighty knows. Nobody knows. Nobody can give a guess or give a date to it. But I think the world is putting intense amount of pressures because there is great amount of recession in Europe. There is inflation that has gone berserk in Europe, also in the United States. There are regions which are suffering for want of wheat and food grains and fertilizers. There is, the stagnation across the world, across in growth. There is a limit to the time the world can accept, but these are important regions of the world. So the fact of the matter is that the pressure is being brought into the whole game. And Chinese had invested largely in Ukraine also. They have good relations with Russia. So I think there is a pressure being built up. How long will this prolong? One can't put a finger to it. But let me put a head to this one. I think there is, it may be moving upwards to have a kind of a ceasefire or kind of a stoppage of operations here. And thereafter discussions will start as to how best the things can progress.
Yeah, one hopes that ceasefire comes soon enough. Thank you very much, Lieutenant General Rakesh Sharma, for joining us in World Today.
Thank you.
Now, moving on, addressing the inaugural session of the CII India-Europe Business and Sustainability Conclave today, External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar highlighted the importance of India and Europe partnership. He pointed out how there has been a jump in bilateral trade and how India and the EU are in sync in various arenas, including security and defense.
I have personally interacted with the foreign ministers of all the 27 EU member states and the High Representative of the European Commission, and these interactions have contributed to the resumption of the India-EU FTA negotiations, the India-EU Trade and Technology Council, which we call the TTC, the announcement of that, dialogues in areas of security and defense and human rights, and not least, a jump in bilateral trade.
Jaishankar also pointed out on clean energy and green transition, these issues being central to India-EU partnership. He also emphasized on India's commitment towards sustainability goals during India's G20 presidency.
When it comes to the green transition, clean energy and green transition are central to the India-EU connectivity partnership. Synergies have emerged in solar and wind energy, in green hydrogen, smart grids, sustainable urban transports, especially metro projects, waste management, and the circular economy.
Now, foreign ministers of the G20 countries are converging in India's capital, New Delhi, for the G20 foreign ministers meeting to be held on Thursday. The New Delhi meeting will be attended by Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, US Secretary of State Antony Blinken, Britain's James Cleverly, while China is expected to send its Foreign Minister Qin Gang. In all, representatives from 40 countries, including non-G20 members have been invited by India, and multilateral organizations will attend. India would push to steer the focus of this week's meeting to issues such as climate change, the debt of developing countries, and reform of multilateral lending institutions like that of World Bank and International Monetary Fund. A meeting of foreign ministers of the Quad countries, the United States, India, Australia and Japan, is also scheduled to be held. The March 1st to 2nd meeting of the foreign ministers comes days after the meeting of the finance chiefs of the bloc in Bengaluru. This meeting is one of the biggest events ahead of the final summit, which is slated to take place on September 9th and 10th in New Delhi, when the presidency will be handed over to the next chair, Brazil. Meanwhile, arrivals for the first G20 India Foreign Ministers meeting has already begun. Mauritius Minister of Foreign Affairs Alan Garneau, Foreign Minister of Brazil Maura Vieira and International Labour Organization G20 Sherpa Richard Mark Salmons arrived in New Delhi this morning. The ministers will also attend the Raisina Dialogue 2023. The Brazilian Ministry of Foreign Relations Ambassador Mauro Vieira also arrived early this morning in Delhi for the first foreign ministers meeting of the G20. External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar will host his counterparts from the G20 nations in New Delhi on March 1st and 2nd. Australia's Minister of Foreign Affairs Penny Wong will this week travel to India and Malaysia. Wong stated that she looks forward to meeting her counterparts at the G20 Foreign Ministers meeting in New Delhi. She will also attend the 2023 Raisina Dialogue. Wong said she looks forward to working with her counterparts on how they can address contemporary international challenges, including strengthening the multilateral system, food and energy security, and humanitarian assistance and disaster relief. She stated that Australia strongly supports India's G20 presidency and welcomes India's ambitious, action-oriented G20 agenda under the theme One Earth, One Family, One Future. Denmark's Crown Prince and Princess are in India. While speaking at an event in Delhi, the visiting Denmark's Crown Prince Frederik Andre Henrik Christian said that the partnership between the two countries is strong and it's moving towards a greener future. He said that India's green transition is underway. He also said that Denmark and India have joined forces through Green Strategic Partnership, which is mutually beneficial and is a testament that both can achieve.
My country, Denmark, but also India, have joined forces through the Green Strategic Partnership. Together, we can support the global effort to secure a greener and more sustainable future. The Green Strategic Partnership is mutually beneficial and a testament of what can be achieved when working together. Danish companies, many of whom are present here today, are experts in their fields and can provide the solutions needed to fuel India's efforts to reach its climate goals, particularly within key areas like energy and water.
India is a global strategic partner of the United States. The Biden administration said this on Monday as Secretary of State Antony Blinken is scheduled to arrive in New Delhi tomorrow. During the three-day visit, Blinken will also attend a Quad ministerial meeting and hold a bilateral talk with External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar.
India is a global strategic partner of ours. We have a wide, broad, deep relationship with India. There will be a lot on the agenda in the bilateral relationship and in the multilateral engagements he takes part in on the margins of the G20. We share a vision with India of a free and open Indo-Pacific, and India is a key partner of ours bilaterally in the context of the Quad as well, other international groupings, even as we've attempted to stitch together some of the partnerships in which India has been a key player. We've spoken a lot, quite a bit recently of I2U2, a new partnership that involves India, it involves the UAE, it involves the United States as well.
Okay, time now in World Today to take a look at all the business-related stories. Tesla Inc. and its chief executive Elon Musk were sued on Monday by shareholders who accused them of overstating the effectiveness and safety of their electric vehicles, autopilot and full self-driving technologies. In a proposed class action filed in San Francisco, federal court shareholders said that Tesla defrauded them over 4 years with false and misleading statements that concealed how its technologies, suspected as a possible cause of multiple fatal crashes, created a serious risk of accident and injury. They said Tesla's share price fell several times as the truth became known, including after the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration (NHTSA) began investigating the technologies, and reports that the Securities and Exchange Commission was investigating Musk's autopilot claims. Tesla said that it agrees to the recall, though it disagreed with NHTSA's analysis. Tesla, which does not have a media relations department, did not immediately respond to requests for comment. Now, news related to the Chinese app TikTok. Canada on Monday announced a ban on social media app TikTok from government-issued devices, saying it presents an unacceptable level of risk to privacy and security, adding to the growing rift between the two countries. The move underscores the growing lobby against TikTok, owned by Chinese firm ByteDance Limited, over concerns of its proximity to Beijing and hold over user data across the world. In a statement, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said that he was showing close attention on the details concerning the online safety of his people. The ban would go into effect from Tuesday, and federal employees would also be blocked from downloading the application in the future, according to a statement from Canada's Treasury Board, which oversees the public administration. In more international news, Hong Kong will stop requiring masks to be worn in public places from Wednesday, drawing to a close the prolonged COVID era that damaged its economy and standing in the world. Hong Kong leader John Lee said that masks will no longer be needed outdoors, indoors or on public transport. The move comes as the government seeks to attract tourists and overseas workers to revitalize the finance hub. Next month will see Hong Kong host the biggest series of international events since often violent protests in 2019 shut down much of the city, including a music festival, Art Basel and the Rugby Sevens tournament. Hong Kong had dropped most other pandemic restrictions by earlier this year. People have been required to wear masks in all public places, including outdoors, from 29th of July 2020. The rule is enforceable by fines of up to 10,000 Hong Kong dollars, with police regularly handing out 5,000 Hong Kong penalties on the spot for transgressors. US President Joe Biden has praised the contribution of African Americans in the United States at an event to celebrate Black History Month, something presidents from both parties have done for decades. His remarks to an audience of the Black Congress members and government officials from the White House's East Room come as some conservative Republicans, most notably Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, are pushing for changes to the way Black history is taught in United States schools. DeSantis is a possible Republican presidential candidate in 2024. As retaliatory unrest intensifies, suspected Palestinian gunmen shot an Israeli American in the occupied West Bank on Monday. US Ambassador Tom Nides has tweeted, "Sadly, I can confirm that a US citizen was killed in one of the terror attacks in the West Bank tonight. I pray for his family." The shooting happened after Israeli settlers attacked Palestinian villages in the West Bank on Sunday night, with dozens of cars and houses burned. The attack came after two settlers from a nearby village were shot dead by a Palestinian on Sunday. Meanwhile, Israel has reinforced its West Bank garrisons. The turmoil continues to aggravate between the two countries, even as Israeli and Palestinian officials agreed at a summit in Jordan to de-escalate tensions. Hundreds of Israeli protesters against recent violence in the West Bank and its Israeli occupation scuffled with police on Monday evening as they tried to block traffic during their demonstration. Protesters said that those behind the violence are deepening the occupation, deepening the bloodshed, and bringing this country into a spiral of violence and escalation. Palestinian officials say 63 Palestinians, including gunmen and civilians, have been killed by Israeli forces this year alone, while Israel says Palestinian attacks have killed 13 Israelis, one of them a policeman and a Ukrainian tourist. So following the latest wave of violence between Israelis and Palestinians, UN Middle East envoy Tor Wennesland on Monday appealed for both sides to take action towards addressing core issues fueling their conflict. He expressed grave concern on the deteriorating security situation in the occupied West Bank, particularly the violence in Huwara that erupted over the past 24 hours. In a statement, he stressed that security forces have the responsibility to maintain security and prevent individuals from taking the law into their own hands. The envoy added that there can be no justification for terrorism nor for arson and acts of revenge against civilians. He also said that all perpetrators of violence must be held accountable and that violence, provocations and incitement must stop immediately and be unequivocally condemned by all. In news coming from Asia now, one of the Southeast Asia's largest and longest running military exercises kicked off on Tuesday in eastern Thailand, resuming full-scale operations after a 2-year hiatus due to the COVID-19 pandemic. According to an official press release, over 7,000 troops from 30 countries will be joining this year's Cobra Gold exercise. This year's drills will focus on land, sea, air, cyberspace, and for the first time ever, space operations that will train troops on how to respond to impacts of aerial phenomena, which include solar storms and interruptions to communication systems. The drills will be held until March the 10th. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un urged government officials to engineer a fundamental transformation in agricultural production amid fears that the country's food shortage is worsening. According to state media, Kim said hitting grain production targets this year was a top priority and emphasized the importance of stable agriculture production during the second day of the 7th enlarged plenary meeting of the 8th Central Committee of the Workers' Party of Korea on Monday. The report did not elaborate on what measures North Korea would take, but Kim said that the changes need to happen in the next few years. Collective farms account for the vast majority of North Korea's agriculture, according to researchers. Such farms typically host multiple small farmers who produce crops with joint labor. Kim's remark comes amid reports of growing food shortages in the country, though North Korea has denied suggestions that it cannot provide for its citizens. Now news from South America. Forest fires have consumed some 1,700 hectares in Cuba, according to authorities, as firefighters, planes and Defense Force helicopters work to extinguish a large-scale forest fire which has been raging for 10 days on the east of the island. The blaze has consumed large areas and caused extensive damage to forest plantations and coffee crops in the mountains of Pinares de Mayare in Holguin province, some 800 kilometers east of Havana. Images of trees engulfed by flames with smoke and fire rising through the foliage appeared on local television. The fire is nearing the Mensura Piloto National Park, which occupies an area of about 8,480 hectares. Local authorities are trying to prevent the fire from spreading beyond the limits of Holguin province to the neighboring province of Santiago de Cuba. Cuba had already reported 80 forest fires in January, a high figure according to local authorities. Pinar Rio and Artemisa in the western zone and Camagüey and Holguin in the central eastern part of the country were the most affected areas. And next we present to you all the sporting action in our segment Sports Today. And I have my colleague Deepika Mehto joining us with all the latest sporting action. Deepika, over to you.
Thanks and good evening, Tanvi. Let's quickly take a look at all that is buzzing in the world of sports and Sports Today of World Today. To begin with cricket, and in a remarkable comeback, New Zealand defeated England by 1 run in the second test match at the Basin Reserve, Wellington, to become the first team in 22 years after India to win a test match after following on. Overall, New Zealand becomes the fourth team to win a test after following on. Neil Wagner bagged a 4-wicket haul, including 2 late wickets, to take New Zealand to a series levelling victory. Now, chasing a total of 258 runs, England lost early wickets and was reduced to 80 for 5 when they were rescued by Joe Root, who scored 95 runs. He, along with Ben Stokes, stitched a 121 runs partnership when Wagner first dismissed Stokes and then Root. Ultimately, with England needing 7 runs to win, Tim Southey first dismissed Ben Foakes and then Wagner dramatically dismissed James Anderson when England just needed 2 runs to seal the series. Earlier, New Zealand were asked to follow on after they were dismissed for 209 runs in their first innings in reply to England's 435 runs. In the second innings, record breaker Kane Williamson stroked a superb century to steer New Zealand to 483 all out and set England a target of 258 runs to win the second test in Wellington. With this, the series ends in 1-1 draw, and New Zealand also becomes second team to win a test by 1 run in 146 years. And after a thumping victory over Australia at the Kotla Test, the Indian team is now all set to take the Australia in the third test starting from the 1st of March at Indoor's Holkar Stadium. While Australia will look to level up the series, India will be looking to seal the spot in World Test Championships final. Keeping in faith in KL Rahul since his last test done in Centurion, Rahul has been on a wretched run averaging 15.9 in tests, and his poor run of form has extended so far. Moving on now, let's take a look at another story that is coming in. Well, Messi has been named as Best FIFA Men's Player of 2022 ahead of his Paris Saint-Germain teammate Kylian Mbappe and Real Madrid star Karim Benzema. While Spain's Alexia Putellas named Women's Player of the Year after inspiring Barcelona to a third consecutive national title in 2022. Argentina coach Lionel Scaloni have been voted as FIFA Men's Coach of the Year after leading his team to the World Cup title.
The great and good of the football world, past and present, gathered in Paris on Monday for the Best FIFA Awards, which saw Argentina World Cup winner Lionel Messi take the top prize ahead of his Paris Saint-Germain teammate Kylian Mbappe and Real Madrid star Karim Benzema. Lionel Messi named FIFA Player of the Year 2022. Also, Argentina scooped all major men's awards after winning a vintage World Cup final last December. 35-year-old forward scored 2 goals in the finals against France, with the South Americans emerging triumphant on penalties following a 3-3 draw after extra time in Qatar.
Yeah, I think up until now we still don't really understand what we did and how much the people enjoyed it and what they experienced and how they are still feeling today. Winning our third World Cup was for us something really special. We'd been chasing after it for a long time, and personally not having another World Cup, it was the only trophy that I did not have, and it is the most important of all. And to culminate my career with soccer's most important trophy, and thank God all the trophies you can play for.
Messi's compatriots Lionel Scaloni and Emiliano Martinez won the Coach of the Year and Keeper of the Year awards, and their supporters even got the Best Fans prize.
Yes, some more years with the national squad and the challenges we have coming up. We always want more. We want to win, and more than anything, we want to compete. And what is there of me in the national squad? The idea of never giving up. That's what life and soccer are all about.
Spain's Alexia Putellas was named Women's Player of the Year after inspiring Barcelona to a third consecutive national title in 2022. Putellas also the first woman to win the Ballon d'Or Feminine award twice since it was launched in 2018.
Well, the people who are there every day, who have supported me in the toughest of times, both in life and soccer. My family, my colleagues, everyone who works at the club, the squad, all of them.
England were also rewarded for their victorious Women's Euro 2022 campaign. Mary Ebbs was named Keeper of the Year. England's Dutch manager, Sarina Wiegman, received the accolade for the best coach.
I think there's so many good coaches around, and I'm lucky that that I work with the best, and that I have good teams around me that support me. Yeah, and I think I'm just trying to be myself and work very hard and try to do the right things.
While 4 England players, Beth Mead, Lucy Bronze, Lee Williamson and Kiera Walsh, were named in the year's World 11. Sports Desk, DD India.
So that's all from the world of sports. Back to you, Tanvi.
Thank you, Deepika. And now, with the world buzzing with news that make it to the headlines, in our next segment, we bring to you what lies beyond headlines.
In Paraguay, Cateora Orchestra of Recycled Instruments gave an unprecedented concert near a landfill site in the city of La Paz to raise environmental awareness and awareness of the importance of the workers who collect the rubbish. The group of youngsters reportedly performed music with instruments made from solid waste they built themselves. So far, they have performed in 51 countries around the world, including Bolivia. The concert came at a time when authorities in La Paz are seeking to minimize the environmental impact of landfills that pollute natural water resources. A splendid exhibition of work by teachers of the Turkmen State Art College was held at the Exhibition Center of the Union of Artists. Of the works assigned by the teachers, in addition to paintings, jewelry, and small sculptures, were on the exhibit. Most of the large-sized paintings on display were based on a historical theme and were made in the style of realism. The art of different techniques on display exhibited the national culture, traditions, and way of the life of Turkmen people. In Tuan Quang, a Vietnamese province, the seasonal pear blossom coated the mountainous village into snow white. This comes after the locals expanded the pear tree growing areas in recent years. At least thousands of visitors are reportedly flocking to the mountain villages of the Dao and the Hmong people to admire the beauty of pear blossoms. Flower War. Carnival tradition engulfs Greek town as locals in a central Greek town doused each other with colored flour as part of an old carnival tradition. The Flower War pits revelers against each other with tons of cooking flour tinted with food coloring. The tradition is believed to have evolved from the 19th century during the period when Greece was occupied by the Ottoman Empire. Ottoman rulers had forbidden carnival festivities, but in defiance, locals would smear their faces with an ash and dance in the street. World Today Desk, DD India.
So with those stories of festivities and change, we wind up this edition of World Today. Hope you liked watching our show. We'll be back tomorrow, same time, with another important international news agenda of the day. Until we meet again, you take very good care of yourself. Namaskar.